Well, Jaco Kleynhans is Solidarity Movement's Head of International Relations, and he joins us now. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us on Late Edition.
Yes, good evening.
Now, President Trump focuses on what he's termed a white genocide in South Africa. Now, we know that crime affects people of all races in South Africa. Why do you think he is honing in on this so-called, what he believes to be, white genocide?
Yeah, I think what is important to understand in the first place is that we as Solidarity said from January, when President Trump was inaugurated to a second term, that we don't believe that there's anything like a white genocide happening in South Africa. We also conveyed that message during 2 trips to the White House and other officials in Washington, D.C. And we do believe that the Trump administration listened to that. President Trump didn't refer to a white genocide in his recent comments yesterday or in the past few weeks, But I do believe that he's very concerned about minority rights, persecution, the racial laws in South Africa that discriminate against minorities, things like the Expropriation Act and South Africa's foreign policy. And I think that is the issues, or that are the issues that the American president wants South Africa to address to solve this tension between the two countries.
Now, do you think that this all stems from when President Cyril Ramaphosa went to the United States and there was that big, should I call it a showdown in the Oval Office, and then President Donald Trump took out from that this white genocide narrative? Do you think that's where it stems from, and why is it still being perpetuated?
I think there was a very long build-up to this over many, many years. There were many reports in American media about the crime problems in South Africa, and then very specifically the problems of farm attacks and farm murders. And that took President Trump, he took that very serious. He was very much influenced by that. We as an organization are also very concerned, as we're concerned about crime on the Cape Flats or in townships in South Africa. We believe that farm attacks need to be declared a priority crime, and we need a specialist unit to investigate farm murders. And I think President Trump feels very strong about that. What happened during the Oval Office meeting between President Trump and President Ramaphosa was that President Trump set out a number of demands, things that he wants the South African government to address so that a very favorable trade agreement can be signed between the two countries. And one of those issues is certainly farm attacks, the issue of farm attacks. The others are expropriation, racial discrimination in South Africa, and South Africa's foreign policy, issues like the relations with Israel and all of that. But I think what's happened over the last few months since that meeting in the Oval Office is that the Americans feel that South Africa didn't really respond to those demands that President Trump made.
Do you think that there are still denialists out there saying that the farm murders aren't taking place?
Yes, I think there's problems on both sides. There's people who will say, yeah, well, there's no farm murders. I mean, we release a list of farm attacks every week. There's about between 5 and 10 attacks on farms every week. At least one person killed on a farm every single week. Last year, it was about 50 people killed on farms. That's a reality. It's very brutal. It's there's usually torture involved in that, so that's a big challenge, a very big problem, the problems of farm attacks in South Africa. So I think that's very serious, and that's something that we are very worried about as an organization. But there's also people who will over-exaggerate the seriousness of this problem, and we're also not doing that. We're not saying that there's a genocide happening in South Africa.
You touched just a few minutes ago on the Cape Flats and the murders happening there, the gang violence. Now, this hasn't been brought up, am I correct in saying that, by US President Donald Trump? Are you okay there?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, thank you.
so we were chatting about the Cape Flats, for an example. Why hasn't this been highlighted, or has it been, by US President Donald Trump?
Yes, I think we've highlighted it ourselves, you know, the problems of crime on the Cape Flats, the serious crisis of rapes in South Africa, you know. Violent crime is a problem that South African communities face every single day, you know. We've been very honest about that. We also saw that during the meeting in the Oval Office, when different kinds of crimes were discussed. What we're saying about farm attacks and farm murders is simply that that's a very, very serious problem for us as Afrikaners. We believe that there's not enough of a focus by the government to address the crisis of these very brutal attacks. We believe that it creates problems in terms of food security in South Africa. There's less than 30,000 commercial farmers left in South Africa, and that's in a country with more than 60 million people. So we are very concerned about the health of our commercial farming community when young people tell us as Solidarity that they don't want to return and go back to farms because they are so concerned about their safety. So I think the issue of farm attacks is very unique, and it needs a unique approach by government to at the end solve this very, very serious problem.
Jaco Kleynhans, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That was Jaco Kleynhans, Solidarity Movement Head of International Relations, chatting to us there and clarifying again that they don't see what is happening in South Africa, referring specifically to the farm killings, as a white genocide.